Okay, welcome to the deep dive. So we're digging into the sources you sent us, right? The articles, the analysis, all that, all focusing on that UEFA Conference League final,
Hmm.
Chelsea versus Real Betis.
Hmm.
And our mission is basically to pull out the key stuff from this material you shared.
Yeah, get underneath the final score, understand what really happened.
Exactly. The drama, the emotional roller coaster, the moments that, well, that really defined it.
And the sources definitely frame it that way. A stunning turnaround, they call it.
Yeah, a clash of like emotional extremes and just a great example of how fast a game can change.
Totally. And what's really interesting in the material is how it sets up that early part of the match. Betis, they really started strong.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What do the sources actually say about how things kicked off?
Well, the picture they paint is pretty clear. Real Betis came out of the blocks flying. They were controlling the tempo, had loads of possession, especially in that first half.
Right.
And you had players making an immediate impact, like Isco was mentioned specifically.
What was he doing?
Pulling the strings is the phrase used, really running the show in midfield.
Okay.
And then Abdesmad Ezelzouli, he was apparently a constant threat on the wing, causing Chelsea problems from the get-go.
So Betis looking sharp. What about Chelsea then, facing that kind of start?
Well, for a long stretch, actually, not just the first half, but maybe the first hour or so, the sources say Chelsea were struggling.
Really? Just couldn't get going.
Yeah, it wasn't really clicking for them. And Cole Palmer, he's specifically mentioned as having a quiet start.
Palmer. Interesting. He's usually so influential.
Exactly. But the material notes he had struggled to make a notable impact, that his influence was minimal early on. So, yeah, a real contrast in how the team started.
Okay, so Betis are dominant. Chelsea are finding it tough. Palmer's quiet. But the sources call it a stunning turnaround. How did that happen? Where was the shift?
This is where the analysis in the sources gets really fascinating. It pinpoints Cole Palmer, saying he suddenly found another gear in that second half. He just came alive.
Wow. After that slow start, he just like switched it on.
That's kind of the picture painted, yeah. And his first massive contribution. The sources describe it as absolutely decisive, a moment of sheer class from him.
Okay, what was it?
He produced this perfectly weighted assist, just brilliant vision and finesse.
And who got on the end of it?
Nicholas Jackson. And the sources say he provided a composed finish. That was a crucial goal.
So that was the turning point.
Seems like it. The sources really emphasize the significance. They call the assistant goal a moment of brilliance that shifted the momentum firmly in Chelsea's favor. One source even labels that moment, "The comeback is complete."
Incredible. From minimal impact to delivering that goal. Did he do anything else major in the comeback?
Oh, yeah. The sources are clear he wasn't done. They mention he added another assist later on as Chelsea took control.
Right.
And they credit his quiet confidence and intelligence as key factors in how Chelsea managed to flip the match on its head.
It really feeds into that idea you mentioned earlier about great players stepping up.
Yep, exactly. The sources link it back to that great players rise when it matters most, which Palmer clearly did after that initial period where he struggled.
Okay, and this leads us to something else the sources highlight, something quite unique about Palmer's reaction after all this.
Yeah, this is fascinating. It's the contrast, right? While the game was turning, and especially after the final whistle, the scene was just, well, chaos and pure joy for Chelsea.
What kind of scenes are described?
The bench exploded in celebration. Players erupted with passion, ran onto the pitch, throwing themselves into embraces, jumping in unison, even dancing with unrestrained joy.
Yeah.
Pure elation.
Sounds intense.
And even the owner, Todd Boehly, he was shown basking in the glow of victory, looking visibly relieved and triumphant. Finally got his hands on a trophy, broken his trophy duck, as the source put it.
So absolute pandemonium, relief, celebration everywhere, and Palmer.
Palmer, smack bang in the middle of all this, was the complete opposite. The sources keep coming back to this. He stayed cool and collected. Yeah. Stayed composed, strolling through the scene with an air of cool detachment. One source uses the phrase, he simply wanders around in the cold style.
Wow.
Acting as if it were just another day at the office.
Just another day at the office. After providing the key assist to win a European final,
Yeah.
That's remarkable composure.
It really is something. And the sources make a direct link between that composure and his performance under pressure.
How so?
They suggest it's that kind of temperament, unshaken by pressure, that separates the good from the great. It loops back to that point about performing when it counts. Maybe that internal calm, that detachment from the surrounding chaos, is part of why he could deliver.
So it's not just about the skill, but the mental game.
Yeah.
The ability to execute when everything's frantic.
That's definitely the angle the analysis takes, being able to deliver even after a tough start to the game.
Okay, so while Chelsea are riding this wave of triumph, what about real Betis? What do the sources say about their reaction?
Well, as you probably expect after leading and then losing like that, it was just crushing disappointment. The material describes emotions running high, players visibly distraught, lots of tears.
Just heartbreak on the pitch.
Yeah, in floods of tears is the description used for many.
Does it mention anyone specifically who took it hard?
It does. Isco, Adrian, and Pablo Fornals are all named as being particularly heartbroken.
Fornals. Why him specifically?
There's a specific detail about him. He apparently had this dream of becoming the first player to win 2 Conference League titles.
Ah, right. And that slipped away.
Yeah. The sources say his chance has gone up in blue smoke, a really evocative phrase for that kind of final disappointment.
Oof. That's tough. Did the sources offer any insight into why Betis faded after such a strong start?
They did touch on that. As the game went on, that early intensity from Betis started to drop off a bit. Isco, who was so dominant early, began to fade, and maybe most importantly, Ezulzuli.
The winger who was a constant threat.
Yeah, him. He was forced off with an injury. And the sources really stress that this proved pivotal.
Losing their main attacking threat.
Exactly. Without him, Betis just lost their edge going forward.
And Chelsea, meanwhile, were finding theirs.
Precisely. While Betis lost that spark, Chelsea could call on their bench, described as a deep bench, loaded with talent and experience.
So the subs made a difference.
Seems so. The sources say the changes brought a new intensity and rhythm for Chelsea. And from there, they basically turned the screw.
Right.
Once they got ahead, they surged ahead and never looked back.
So if you had to summarize the overall narrative from the sources on how the final played out.
I'd say it's portrayed as Chelsea showing resilience. They had come from behind, they weathered early struggles, and crucially, they summoned their quality when it counted.
And Betis.
Betis put in a valiant effort, no doubt about that start. But ultimately, they were left staring into the distance, pondering what could have been. That classic final feeling for the losing side.
Yeah. Amidst all that high emotion, though, the triumph and despair, there was also a moment of, sportsmanship captured, wasn't there?
That's right. A small but nice detail about Jadon Sancho comforting Anthony.
Both on loan from Manchester United, right?
Yeah.
But on opposite sides here.
Exactly. And the sources contrast their nights. Sancho had apparently scored a superb goal earlier and really fully delivered for his side.
Whereas Anthony.
Anthony had struggled to leave his mark on the game, so a tough evening for him.
But Sancho still took a moment.
Yeah, and the sources frame it nicely as a reminder that football, despite its fierce rivalries, still offers space for empathy, a human touch in all the drama.
When you pull back and look at everything the sources laid out, it really is a perfect example of the emotional extremes in a final.
Absolutely. That's kind of the main takeaway, isn't it? The material concludes by calling the final a testament to football's emotional extremes, triumph and despair, redemption and regret.
And Chelsea won it how?
Not just through talent, the sources emphasize, but through resilience, belief, and brilliance when it mattered most. That ability to dig deep and find those key moments.
So let's leave our listeners with this thought then. Thinking about Cole Palmer, his almost unnerving, cool detachment in the middle of all that intense celebration and heartbreak. Does that kind of internal composure, when everything outside is so emotionally charged, does that hold a key to performing at the absolute highest level? Maybe not just in sport, but in any high-pressure situation. What does that detachment actually allow someone like him to do, or maybe see, that others who are caught up in the emotion might just miss?
That's a really interesting question to ponder. What does that coolness enable?
Something for you to think about.